Okay, my name is Michel, and I work at Local as a user experience designer on Historia, which is a real estate search. If you ever moved in like in the UK, you may have heard of it. And I'm going to talk about adaptive web design, and I wanted to kind of start by trying to define what adaptive web design is, because it's kind of a buzzword that tends to be overused or used in the wrong context a lot. And there are some ambiguous meanings also regarding accessibility or for disabled users. And the one that I'm going to use now is, oh, actually, this is not. Okay. So it's also surrounded by a lot of other buzzwords, such as progressive enhancement and responsive design. I'm going to come back to those two later. But the definition that that I'm going to use for this talk is kind of a very broad one. In that adaptive design is a design that can adapt to its environment, so how it's being used in which context, how it's being viewed. It's also about adaptive web design, so I'm not going to talk about apps. I think someone else has got that covered later. When you talk about the web, you actually don't really know anything about how it's being used. There are so many ways to access the web, and you cannot really make any assumptions anymore. Which is actually exactly what adaptive design kind of encompasses, is that this is not the web. You don't have absolute control about presentation or use of whatever you put out there. So I'm kind of going to try to discuss adaptive web design in three terms. Adaptive web design as a philosophy, as a strategy how to achieve that philosophy, and a set of techniques that kind of help you go out there. Hopefully you will see what I mean with that. I'm going to start with kind of a short history of the web. If you develop for the web, this may seem a little bit trivial, but it's actually kind of useful to see where this is coming from and why this is important. So the first web, like around 1995, Tim Berners-Lee in his office, was this. You had your browser, the browser requests a page, then there is a web server, it serves you a page of hypertext, and the point is that it is about information that has certain relation to each other. And then it actually kind of consists of two parts, HTTP and HTML. And people soon figured out that HTML was very interesting because you could do a lot of things with it. So as soon as people figured out that you can put information on the web, people also kind of wanted to control how that information arrived on the other side. So they tried to put all these things in HTML that actually had nothing to do with information and were more about presentation. And soon it became very messy, and we had this stuff where you have all this information and presentation stuff. It's all kind of mixed together, and it's not really easy to read anymore, and a lot of stuff just broke down. So fortunately for that, we now have a solution. It's called CSS, and we can separate content and style and serve them separately, so that even if the style doesn't make any sense, at least the content arrives and you can read the information. So then people started to do other interesting things with the web. So it became not just about like static information, but the information could also be interactive. So you would ask a server like, search for everything that has something to do with the internet, and it would generate a page dynamically, give it back to you, and you would have like a list of search results. So first search engines were born. And soon after that, we also figured out that, hey, if we can do this on the server, we can also have interactive things on the client, and JavaScript was born. And for the first few years, it was actually completely useless, and it was just used for to annoy us all. And like anything that it was used for, if it worked, it was marginal at best, and half of the time it just broke everything down. So soon, a few years, it took a few years for people to kind of try to struggle with getting this to work, until we had these nice frameworks that took a lot of the hassle out of it, and it started to actually be like reasonable to do interesting stuff with JavaScript. And in the beginning, we did the same with JavaScript that we also did with this presentation stuff. We jumped on it, and we put all of this JavaScript like in the HTML, and it became a huge mess again. And then kind of around the same time as we got all these frameworks, Prototype, jQuery, it also became clear that there was a better way to do this, and we could actually also separate the interactive elements on the client from the HTML and serve it separately. So now we have like this nice 3 separate components of the information, the interactive parts, and the JavaScript and the style. And everything was good again. So how do we get into all the mess in the first place? Oh, sorry, I forgot about this one. So another thing that these frameworks made possible was that it became actually like feasible to get information on the fly while you were on the page using JavaScript, and we called it Ajax. So this means that you the first time you visit the page, you get like all this HTML style and JavaScript, and then if you do something, instead of getting everything fetching the whole page again, you can just get like a part, in this case like a chunk of HTML, and you put that in the page, and with the kind of advent of JSON, you can even just send just the data, and then you generate the HTML and you put it in the page. But the problem with this is that we keep getting more toys, and if you have more toys, you want to play with them. So a lot of these problems were actually caused by designers, web designers, or developers taking these new techniques, these new things that we could do, and putting them out there, and then expecting them to work. And of course, as you know, it never works. So we kind of had a problem. And recently, I don't know if you heard about this, but Lifehacker, or actually Gawker, did this huge redesign of all of their websites, and they made everything really fancy with everything was Ajax, and the whole page was like a single page application. So you just you loaded the page once, and then every news article that you clicked used Ajax to kind of asynchronously pull in the news article and show it on your screen. Yeah, nice idea in theory, and then in practice they put it out there. They broke something, and just for like I think it was for like a day or something. They just served empty homepage, and it was, yeah, as you can guess, a pretty bad user experience. It came down to the discussion of how you use this, and there are basically 2 strategies, and they're called graceful degradation and progressive enhancement. And the idea of graceful degradation is that you design with all your toys, you make the best thing, the best experience possible, and then you backtrack. You try to make it work for all the like B-level browsers and platforms that you don't really care that much about because they don't support all your fancy toys. And it's a nice idea, but in practice it turns out that people actually don't really, you know, once you have it out there and then you're like, how many users are going to use this, you know, and people are actually starting to use that browser less and less anyway. So in a lot of cases, your visitors, maybe even you already launched it and then you're kind of still working on this, so they see this, which is also not a very good user experience. Progressive enhancement is a design philosophy that is the opposite, where you think you start with the basics, you start with something that works, you start with the information, and then you kind of build on top of it, and you extend and you add the toys and the stuff, which is something that is actually very easy to do. with this separation of content and style and behavior, because you can just start with the content and then you start building on top of that. You put the behavior and the style, and even if it doesn't really fully work for everyone, at least you still have the basic experience. Okay, so I'm going to start with a little example of progressive enhancement. And since I talked about Ajax before, it seems like a good kind of case study. Because Ajax, as Gawker did with Lifehacker and their other websites, is really useful to provide kind of this single page application experience where you don't have, like, everything feels really snappy, and you can just you just load everything with Ajax, and you just load the parts that you need, and you don't refresh the whole page. Which is something that Twitter also does. If you use their site right now, you will notice that you just load the page once, and then every time you click a link, it just updates a little part of the interface, and it doesn't cause a full page refresh. But as you can see, the way they do it is kind of weird, because all the links in Twitter, they are not real links. So if you click them, they're caught by JavaScript, and then something happens, hopefully. But if you so if you look at the URL, I don't know if you kind of know how the web works, but this is the part that's being sent to the server, and this is the part that's just for the browser. So this is what you normally have, and this is what Twitter uses. So any URL on Twitter that you go to, if you have the URL bar and you refresh the page, it goes to like to like twitter.com, and then the browser handles the other part. Which is nice if your browser can do that. But if it doesn't, this is what Twitter gives you now. If you turn off JavaScript, you go to twitter.com, this is what you get. They basically say, oh, doesn't work, just use our mobile site. Which is also not very nice way to be greeted, if you ask me. So, like, the reason they do this is because they want it to be fast. It's actually really, if you have JavaScript, using Twitter is actually a very good experience because it feels really fast. And even though if you click someone, it may take a while for that to load, as it would normally do with like a regular website, it feels faster because it's not the whole page that's being loaded, it's just a part. So you're not staring at this blank page while it's loading. And actually a lot of stuff they already serve ahead. So if you have like those tabs on Twitter where you click between them, it doesn't even need to ask the server because it already knows, it's just hidden. So it just needs to show the page. So it's actually pretty clever. And it feels faster, so people, and in Twitter's case they're not selling anything, but if you are, it's actually pretty important that your users stay on your site to actually buy whatever it is you're selling. So with this idea of progressive enhancement in mind, how can you build something that doesn't break when people don't have all the latest and greatest things? Well, the answer is actually pretty easy. You just build something that works, and then you start making it faster for people who happen to have JavaScript. So I kind of made this simple page. I'm going to show you. It has two tabs, and I'm going to show you how to progressively enhance that. So if you know JavaScript, if you don't know JavaScript, this may get a little bit confusing, but I'm going to try to make it easy. So here we have our kind of diagram again. If you go to like the first page, your browser is just going to ask for that URL, and you're going to get like the three components that I said before. You're going to get HTML, styles, and JavaScript. And in the HTML, there is a link, and the links goes to another page. Let's see if we can go back here. So if you click this thing is just a link that goes to another page. So if you're going to click that, your browser is just going to ask for the other page, and the server is going to say, okay, I have that page, going to send you the HTML, the styles, and the JavaScript again. Fine, works. But we can make it faster. And to do that, I'm going to kind of cheat here and use some experimental stuff that not all browsers support. I'm going to use something from HTML5 called History API. With the History API, you can actually pages in the browser's history without actually navigating to them. And I'm going to use a little library called Path.js because then the syntax looks better on my slide, and it just requires less lines, but it basically works the same. So with that path.js, you can define a URL and then say, okay, instead of going to this URL, I want to execute this JavaScript. So that's what I'm going to use. So now here we have that link that I said before, and it's in the HTML. So normally if you click that, your browser goes to the link, loads the page. It works. But now instead, this part of code, if you know jQuery, is going to listen for clicks on that link, and then it prevents the browser from handling the click. And instead, it does it checks if we know this this path, if we know the URL, and then it's going to load that link using Ajax. And actually, it's not going to load the whole page, but it's just going to load this from this URL that says partials and then the name of the page. So that's so you click the link, it recognizes that it's a link that it knows, and instead of letting the browser handle that, we're going to handle it ourselves, and it just gets the partial content, which is pretty much what Twitter does, except in a different way. So instead of requesting the whole page, we just send the content in this case, and the result is that, I'm just going to go back, is that if you click this link, the bar at the top is going to stay, and this white part is going to get replaced. I'm not going to open it in a browser because I'm kind of running out of time. And then the next step, if you want to do what Twitter does, is you build your whole page, your whole website, or your whole web app, if it's small enough, as one page that knows how to reload parts of itself, and then you serve up kind of as a package. So you give, for example, in the search engine, you can give the results back as a list of books or houses or whatever, if you're Amazon, and then you just change the way that you present it in JavaScript, but you also know, because you build it first, that if people don't have JavaScript, that if they click a link, it's just going to go to that page and it's going to work anyway. So that was progressive enhancement by example. And then the other thing that you often hear when people talk about adaptive web design is something called responsive design. And usually what they mean is like a responsive layout. And a responsive layout is a layout that responds to the device constraints. So if you have a big screen, it's going to look different than if you have a small screen. And this is something that started really early. When the web just came out, it was just about information. People didn't really have different screen size. It was not really something that people thought about. It was about information. So a browser knew how to display. And all the layouts were fluid because it was just the information and you displayed. But then people wanted to get control over this information, and then they started thinking back to the old way of doing design, which was design for print. And in print, you know exactly what everything looks like. So we wanted that control back, and we started with the tables and the mask. But even maybe 2 years ago, there was this really kind of trend to use this system called 960 grid system, and basically assumes that you have a minimum resolution available inside your browser of 960 pixels, which is also what I used when I made my website 2 years ago. But then, so actually this part is fixed. So whatever you do, it's going to look exactly like that. However you resize your browser, if your browser window gets smaller, you just get scroll bars. It was kind of, you need to do something something's got to give. And there are kind of ways kind of between, where you do part fluid and part fixed, but it's either going to look like this half of the time, or it's going to look like this half of the time. It's both not ideal. And with CSS3 we got some new toys again, and they're called media queries. And now you can actually have different style and different layout based on the resolution that the user has. Since we have a lot of, so if you want to design for different screen resolutions, you can now use this to change the layout based on resolution. And I have a little example here. I hope that I can click this in. It's going to work. Because I kind of wanted to show you a very good example of this. Oh, it's opened in the wrong screen. Yeah, so this is the website of the Boston Globe. As you can see, that if I make the window very wide, it's going to have a 3-column layout. But as I resize the screen, it kind of automatically reflows itself to make everything fit. So the images get different, like some things change. And if I make it small enough, it's eventually just going to end up with a single column layout. That if you have like a mobile phone, this is what it's going to look like. And this is done with those CSS media queries. So if this is the world you're living in, where you have like certain devices that you want to support, it's very tempting to do this. You just define like, oh, I have this device and I have this device and this device, and you try to target them individually. But then you're kind of falling into this trap of using your toys to support specific things, which is not really what adaptive design is about. So the consensus now is that it's actually smarter to start like this. You start simple, kind of like progressive enhancement. So you start with the base, and then as you have more screen real estate available, like a larger resolution, you start to like expand on that. So you start with a single column layout, for example, in the Boston Globe, and then if you have more screen space available, you can actually put like some of the content that's below, you can put it on the side. And this is also the idea. So the idea is kind of that instead of letting all the devices that you plan to support define what the user experience is, you let the content define that, and then depending on what device you have, you get the best experience. If you happen to have more than 600 pixels, you happen to have enough space to show 2 columns, great. So you don't need to target all those devices separately. And there's also something that you may have heard. They call this like mobile first design, but it's basically a fancy word for like progressive enhancement for responsive design. And you may also be tempted to think that progressive enhancement needs to mean that you always start with something stupid. But I think that especially in the case of mobile first, is not really true, because you start with like the shared part, and then you expand in whatever direction you have capabilities. So on a desktop, you may have a bigger screen, so you progressively enhance your basic experience with like a layout that uses more space. But on a mobile device, you can expand that basic experience with other capabilities that are really special for a mobile device. So, for example, most desktop computers don't have like a GPS sensor or orientation sensor or a camera, and even though we cannot really use those yet in the web, it's something that is coming. So you can actually like start with the shared part, and you expand towards the capabilities that you have. So for example, a phone can actually call people. If you put a URL with a phone number, it works. So it's actually really exciting. It's not just about limitations, it's also about opportunities. So to kind of come full circle and also close off my talk, I would like to summarize what I said about adaptive design earlier. So it's the philosophy that you cannot really control how people are going to view your content when it's on the web. So don't try, and just make sure that whatever capabilities people, like however people access it, that they get like the best experience that you can offer them. And the kind of the strategy for doing that is by starting with the base experience and building on top of that, to ensure that you make use of any extra things that, like extra capabilities that people have. And we have a lot of, like, as web design, it's almost the best time to be working on that right now, because you have like great tools. You have CSS and JavaScript, and it's all beginning to get like it's all beginning to come together in a good way to make it actually work. So don't do this. Don't think that really the time that web design was about like imitating a magazine on a screen is really over. And if you, yeah, I'm sorry if you still have to work that way. So it also means that this is over. Drawing a user interface in Photoshop is not realistic, because you already frame yourself wrong. You start with a fixed canvas, so you decide like, okay, I'm going to have a 960 pixels canvas for my 960 grid website, and I'm going to fill it. It doesn't work that way anymore. You need to be able to adapt. Doesn't mean that you cannot use Photoshop to draw buttons and cool effects. So, and to kind of close off, I wanted to present also an alternative view, because of course not everything is suitable for using adaptive design. I think anything that is on the web should more or less use adaptive design, but it doesn't mean that all the experience should be the same. And this is something that you see, for example, if you look at Amazon's products, they actually tailor some pretty specific things for specific devices. So you have like this Amazon. They have, if you visit Amazon on your tablet, you get like the catalog where you can search for things, but they also have this thing called window shopping, where you can just like, kind of browse around. So it's a different experience that they made, especially for people who are using an iPad on the couch and they just want to kind of browse around. Also, it doesn't mean that like a mobile device doesn't mean that people are mobile. I don't know, like how many of you use your iPhone when you're like watching TV or something? I know I do. So how many people? Or like also other phones or whatever. Yeah. So like at least a third of the room does. So it doesn't mean that people are mobile when they're using a mobile device. So like the experience is another thing. So maybe we should also think about adaptive experience. So it's kind of something that I wanted to put out there. I don't know how that fits into this whole philosophy. So maybe some of you have good ideas about that. So I'd like to thank you all. These are the pictures that I used on Creative Commons license. And if you want to find me, I'm on Twitter and you can email me. So I hope you enjoyed the talk. Thanks.